Hard refresh.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to a special Accessibility Day and Mother's Day special episode of Hard Refresh. Why is it a Mother's Day special episode? Nick, can you answer that for us, please?
Yeah, we've got my mom here. So my favorite architect, Teresa Sequeira-Lundy.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for actually coming on. We've talked a lot about accessibility in a digital sense. As I'm sure you've spoken to Nick about it, we do an awful lot of that work here. But one of the things that I find super interesting is that accessibility in the digital sense is just really a growth or an outcropping of accessibility in the physical sense, in the analog sense, or as Nick called it, we've got bits and atoms. So why don't you give us a little bit about yourself as to, why do we bring you onto the podcast?
Right. So I'm a registered architect, and I went to school in the 70s at Pratt. And at that time, there was the thinking of having to help the disabled. I in one of the slides, the first slide, I showed the President Dwight Eisenhower presenting a medal to the Men of the Year in 1957, which is the year I was born. And when they went to give him the medal, he actually couldn't get into the building. And that was the first time that nationally it came to the forefront, the idea that we needed to do something for the disabled. And eventually, in 1961, they started the American Disability, the American National Standard actually introduced standards, like standard details on what to do for curb cuts, parking, and telephone heights and stuff like that. And this publication became very instrumental in 1990 when the ADA Act was actually introduced, and they referred to the current version of the standard. This standard has been revised or updated really since a few times now. I think the current standard is 2010, and which includes everything from bathroom stalls to the width of aisles, the accessibility. And as an architect, this is something that we've started since the 1990s, incorporating. That becomes a base. For us, there are other codes. There's the fire code, there's which involves safety, there's the building code, which involves construction, there's the plumbing, electrical, all other codes that we also have to introduce to our drawings.
So Chuck, this reminds me a lot of like the WCAG standards that we work with. Right. So, very often they point to that and they say, go look at WCAG. A lot of these, the outcomes of a lot of these legal cases, they say, there are standards. Go look at WCAG. So here the ADA said, here are the existing standards. Go look at those. So
what I love about what you're saying is that, so you kind of have a base level at what you're addressing. Things like aisle widths. So a wheelchair can fit down them, right? So, but these are what I really kind of want to dig into because you mentioned curb cuts, and curb cuts are things that I've spoken to Nick about before. Just for everybody that doesn't understand, can you just explain what a curb cut is?
Sure, it's a change in grade when that actually explains the curb, so that it goes from one level to the other in a transition, is sloped and easily attainable. I mean, you push the wheelchair without having to have that curb.
Right.
And curb cuts are actually an interesting thing because I've talked to Nick that they although they are great for the handicap, they're actually a great design because it helps mothers with baby carriages. It helps loading up a package into, so it's becoming really beyond the handicap design. It's what I like to call it the universal design now, because it doesn't just apply for the handicap or the disabled. It's really just good design.
So I'm so glad you went there. Because what I find, again, another thing I find amazing. Now, I know the story. I think I've talked about it before on the podcast, maybe I haven't, but the story about where curb cuts came from. And there was this one night where a bunch of people actually broke and took sledgehammers and crushed the curbs, to basically make a statement that, like, hey, we can't get up these. But one of the things that I love about accessibility in general is the fact that it fosters better design. So it fosters these things of universal design, and that when you're not thinking about it, it's just like, well, I just step up on a curb, but that's for people that can walk. You don't realize it until, and if you're not differently abled, you get to the point where, like, oh, well, now I'm pushing a baby stroller. Wow, this is a pain in the neck to get this up this curb. Why don't they have a ramp somewhere? So these things that come about because of being able to make some form or element within our society accessible to a small subset of people who need it, ends up benefiting the larger subset of people, or like it ends up benefiting society on a whole. So, right?
I want to add one more thing about curb cuts. So I think in one of the graphics I show a CNI, a blind person, at a curb cut. Mm-hmm. And actually, yes. If you notice there, right there, those truncated bubbly things, they actually are cues for a blind person to see, to notice that there's going to be a grade change. And this can also be extended beyond. There's other cues that different kind of pavers that actually are like have the linear look to it. And there was another graphic that was showing that. Mm-hmm. And actually, those are all cues for a blind person with a blind stick that will read it on the ground what's happening.
I love that. So typical people be walking around, don't even realize what these are there for. They see them everywhere. They don't understand what they're for, but they're there. You see these on the subway too, right, mm-hmm. before the edge of the platform. That is going to drop off 6 feet down, right? Right, perfect. So you can kind of see, actually, this is an interesting trail directing somebody through to the steps, alerting them that, hey, you're about to hit steps. So,
Exactly, yes.
Fantastic.
There you go. And then, like, you can have a path directed from from maybe the bus stop into mm-hmm. a building. I mentioned to Nick something for the blind that I kind of like found by accident, was that there are, besides what we call in architecture the barrier-free design, there are gadgets nowadays that are out there that are helping the blind. And they're actually a gadget and an application that will give them a tour where their surroundings, will read text, will actually have facial recognition and what kind of emotion they're at, and it literally will completely describe their surroundings for a blind person or where they're walking through, and can give them a tour.
Nick, is that a screen reader for the real world?
I mean, it reminds me of kind of like what Teslas have, where they're reading the actual posted signage for what's the speed and what exits are coming I guess so. It's like OCR, right? Screen readers.
So one is called the CNL, and the other one is Blind Square. They're both either gadgets or applications for the blind that they can actually enhance their walking experience.
That's amazing. So I heard you mention barrier-free design. Can you talk about that?
Yes, well, so that's what we are as architects in the 70s. It started calling the kind of design that we would address for a disabled, because they're all physical. You know, it's making sure that there weren't any barriers from the parking lot or from where they were coming from, to be able to go into a building, whether it was a commercial building or an office building, and they would have in every level, you know, either a ramp or a lift or an elevator, something so that they could actually go from one end to where they were their destined place. And that's what we called as architects. That was our really what we were calling our design at that time, just having barrier-free architecture. And obviously now it's the lingo, it's more like ADA compliant. But it goes beyond just the ADA. And in my mind, it's always been for a barrier for any person.
Right. So the idea of barrier-free design, certainly within the architectural space, is the idea of physical barriers, right? So I don't want to have anything in place or not in place that will prevent somebody from accessing specifically public places, right? So web-based accessibility is the same thing. We do barrier-free design, we do barrier-free development. But the idea is that it's not the physical space, it's information. So the idea is to remove any barriers that will prevent somebody from accessing that information in the way that it is intended. Now, it's not going to be the same, right? So if we have pictures, somebody that's blind obviously can't see the picture, but we do something called it's a alternative text within an attribute within the image tag that describes that image in the context that it is in the page. So it's a different way of describing it, but it's a purposefully different to address the specific needs of that person in this aspect, someone who's blind. Can you give an example of anything in the architectural space that was like that? Like it was something that is done specifically different to address that. I mean, you know, we've already talked about ramps and curb cuts, but I'm just curious if there's anything else in that realm.
And Mom, actually, if there's a slide that you want me to show, let me know, and we can edit those out, and you can just say, hey, go to slide XYZ, and I could pull those up. I know you have one that's like a lobby reception area or something.
Right. I think that's something that, although everybody just assimilates into it, it's really has a lot of thought, because now hospitality places and office buildings, they give you that double height, one for a person who's standing up and speaking directly to a receptionist, and one that is geared to a wheelchair bound person who's
right. Okay. Right. Yeah. So that's a great example of something you don't think about, right? It's a reception desk.
Right.
Right. And a lot of times you would walk into a reception desk and it's super tall, and that's fine for somebody that's standing up. But it's even, you know, that's not even an accommodation or a change or a modification for someone who's differently able. That could be someone who's just short.
Sure.
Exactly. Right? Or a child.
Or a child. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what are we looking at here?
So here's various things that are actually are accommodating. For instance, there's the blind on the right hand and the bottom right hand that making sure that obstructions are in the aisle aren't going to hit them.
Yeah.
And then as you enter into a reception place, the door width has to be a certain width. And we're in a sitting area, there is a dedicated area for a wheelchair person to locate or park.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right.
And there's also, I think, two height water fountains. There's obviously the two height counters.
And the coat racks too. Yeah, we see that.
Oh, yeah. So all right. So
coat racks.
So yeah. So the coat rack. These are things that I find fascinating because they are very cool design problems. We have a closet that has a coat rack that needs to accommodate two different heights of people so they can hang up their coat, right? So how do you do that? Like in this visual, you actually have one that has two 90-degree angles, right? But that's, somebody had to design that and figure that out. Things you don't even realize, like the doors with glass in them so you can see somebody's coming.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, very interesting.
I mentioned to Nick that site design also has evolved into the parking stalls and the dedicated van spots for the disabled. Yeah. And originally, our thought was that you needed to have the accessible parking right as close as possible to the building, and they would park right up. See, you could see that the dedicated parking spots are right at the building. And in the next slide, you'll notice that we've actually improved the idea. I mean, basically, a person who would park head-on into a spot, backing up was pretty hard because they were parking, reversing into traffic. Mm-hmm. So now, we've actually we've improved the idea that was originally suggested by the standards. We've actually now include making sure that we have the fire aisle free.
Yep.
And the actually where we are accommodating now the disabled is actually a more ease of entry for a disabled.
Well, it's also safer, right? So you don't have an active driveway, right, where these large vans, which have sight issues because of blind spots, backing out. Yeah, that's fascinating.
Exactly. So there's been, a modification, and sometimes it's just tweaking it up, based on what their standards wanted, but actually really taking it to the next level, which adds to the safety and all the other issues that we are constantly trying to better.
So Nick, there's a cool digital kind of analog to the digital analog. That's an odd statement, but when we have sites that have these large full width, full height videos, right? There is a piece of the WCAG guidelines that says that we need to be able to pause video or animation that's continuing on past 5 seconds.
Right.
So like it can't loop past 5 seconds. We have to be able to pause it. It has to do with people getting distracted. So from an accessibility standpoint, somebody with ADHD or something like that, or some kind of cognitive issue will just be focused on this moving video and never move past that. So given the ability to pause it so they can reset and move past. But so they don't tell you how to solve that. They just say it has to do this. So in this case, we have to go beyond beyond the requirements to figure out, well, how is this going to work? How does this work well? And then also for the larger portion of the audience who are typically able, how do we solve that so it's not an impediment to that group?
Right.
And that's where the idea of in inclusive design comes through, and making sure that whatever you're doing there is not, like, you don't want to do something that's going to remove a barrier for somebody with disability, but create a barrier for somebody who doesn't have one.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. So you have to think it through.
Yeah.
One of the other parallels. Yeah. So one of the other parallels my mom and I were talking about is that we also plan, when we build a website, we plan about the routes that people will take. And sure, yeah, your average, I guess, sighted user, how are they going to go to this page? We think about what the user experience is going to be, the user flow. But then we also think about, okay, how does a keyboard user get to this spot? How does a screen reader user get to this spot? And that's one of the reasons why we have like the skip to links, skip to the main content, because after a while they're starting to kind of read that nav bar over and over and over if they're a keyboard or screen reader user. I think my mom has something parallel, and she's got a couple of slides about that, about kind of predicting their path and showing what's that user flow path going to be.
Yeah, let's see that.
Are
you going to bring up a?
Sure, like this.
Yeah, that's exactly showing the path, all the obstacles that are involved. But I thought we were talking about shortcuts, in architecture, when we have some programs, we have some commands that we use, and we actually type out that whole command. And then there's as the program has developed, there are like just a letter shortcut of that you don't have to type the whole word, you just use that letter. Or and then even in AutoCAD, it has developed into just an icon, whereas some people that have started with the beginning of the versions, they still can type in, and it's still quite a way of getting to whatever command you need. And the younger people or the younger users now, they're mostly just touching icons. But that's just because they developed their customized way of using that program. What I was also talking to Nick was using more audible access to a program, because even for me, although I can go ahead and actually type in everything or access my product that I want, the other day I was ordering a lithium battery. And basically, I had to go look for it. I had to type in the quantity, and my account and all that. If I could have just in 3 words say, I need this lithium battery, one.
Yeah, like Alexa.
All right, so be careful about saying that. You just turned on a whole bunch of people's devices. So what you're talking about is basically voice, right? So that's an amazingly cool technology that I think a lot of people don't realize. They just think it's beneficial for them, right? They don't realize that's a huge boon for people with visual impairments, or even cognitive impairments, where it might be difficult for them to type into a computer or push an icon or tap an icon on a phone screen. Being able to use these, OK Google and Alexa and Siri and all these things, be able to talk to and have an interface that is just based on your voice. It's pretty amazing.
That's exactly what the universal, exactly. The connectivity there is just going to be amazing once you're able to connect your security, your clocks, your doorbells, your cameras, your windows, all of that.
So do you see that? So how do you see that affecting what you do from an architecture standpoint, do you find yourself looking to design things differently in the space, knowing that it might be a smart space, right? A smart home or a smart place. Do you find yourself doing things differently?
So in architecture, there's always a lag of because there's a lot of existing houses or residences, and so that the only time they're triggered into becoming adaptable is when they start renovating a house with changing plumbing, and then that triggers them into creating a more accessible environment. But if you're just going to change in kind, then you're not exactly going to follow the better design, which is what I like to call the universal design. But the building department is now becoming more and more the agency that is going to be policing what you do with your renovation, so to speak, and how you update it so that it becomes adaptable. I think our aging population really should, when they do an investment in their house, is to upgrade their bathroom and their kitchen so that when they become more and more disabled, that they have that already built into their design.
Yeah.
Even if you're injured or break a leg, you want it so that your bathroom has a curbless shower that you can roll into. There you go. You see that you're seeing a lot in hospitals. I mean, in hospitals, but also in hotels, because they're already thinking that without a curb you can come in right there, and they're already adapting to that kind of shower. Yeah. And this is something that if you're going to invest in your residential, you should be able to do that.
Yeah, and this image specifically, like, kind of cool looking.
It really
right. It doesn't, it does, the fact that it is very accessible, but it's also good too, because if you have a caregiver, now you've got glass there so you can see, God forbid somebody falls over or can't get in, has a problem in there, I actually talked to my brother about this specifically, and I'm like, well, doesn't the water come out? And as long as it's not an amazing amount of water, the shower pan is slanted. You don't see it, because a lot of times they're going to be using tile to do that. So the pattern of the tile completely disrupts the idea that it's actually ramped and curved down to the drain. And you don't really even feel it while you're standing there, because it's slight and you're going over a 4 foot span, right?
Yeah.
So that way you have this kind of smooth in. You don't have to have this, saddle that's sitting there that's going to prevent somebody, make it nearly impossible for them to get over,
Absolutely. And the other thing is, if they're going to invest on an existing house, I know that ramps, if you're going to ramp up 21 inches, you have to go and have a ramp that's 21 feet long. But now
is that what it is? It's a foot. It's a foot for every inch.
It's an inch per foot.
Right.
Wow.
A very smooth kind of slope, or even they may even accept an inch per every 10 inches.
A foot every 10 inches. Okay.
That becomes a very long. But I was telling Nick that there are exterior lifts that actually a wheelchair bound person can actually operate it, and that to me would be a great investment in retrofitting your house. That is, so far I've only talking about existing houses. New build is a whole different set of code, because a new build will have built in all these items, including actually, let me take that back. May show in plan how it can be adapted. It doesn't necessarily have to show the physical change, but on plan, you need to show the building department how it will meet all these minimum requirements for the person with mobility issues.
Yeah. So there's so many connections between the physical space, what you do, and the digital space, what we do. Because at the end of the day, we're both building things, right? And I use architectural metaphors a lot when I'm explaining things to clients, where you have a wireframe, and that's basically your architectural drawing before you actually move to start building. But the idea that you structure things within the information architecture on our end, and in your way, it's literal architecture. But there are certain ways we do things and build things at the beginning to set us up for success, for accessibility later.
Right.
So that we're not getting to a point and all of a sudden we're like, oh, now that's not standard practice, I think, for most development houses. I mean, most development houses just do it. They do what they're good at. We talked about this before, Nick, the amount of divs that React developers use for whatever reason, and they just attach roles to them, and without using use a button for a button, don't use a div for a button, and then jump through hoops to make that div work like a button. Just use what is supposed to be for that purpose. So start correctly, do it the right way first. That way you're not spending more money, taking more time to make that accessible. And the same thing is even more true for a space. If you're going to need a ramp, and it has to be, say, like, let's use your example. You've got the 21-inch rise and you need to have 21-foot ramp. Well, you may not have that amount of space to go straight out from the door. So now you needs to snake around, right? So you see that a lot of times, right? It just gradually goes down levels, but now you still need the room for that, right? Yeah. So you need to make that plan and set that up. It's the same exact thing we do in the digital space.
Right. The setup may be a little harder because you're already thinking on all those levels. So it may take you a little longer, but it pays off in the long run. As far as the efficiency of this stuff.
It pays off in the long run.
Right.
Yep. That's I think that might be the name of the episode.
Well, you think about it's a good investment into your house too, when you show that, maybe they don't need that wheelchair lift, but you say, the stairs are wide enough so that when, if somebody were to live here, they could put a wheelchair lift, or they could have a wheelchair accessible bathroom or whatever.
As actually a selling point to say, like, this has been designed and accommodated to take care of that if necessary. We've got there are wider aisles. You'll see that there's more room in the bathrooms to accommodate things like that.
Yes, especially for the aging population. Indefinitely, if they want to stay longer in their home, that is definitely a plus for them.
Yeah. So I'm curious. So in the 70s, when you were kind of getting started with all this, was there any pushback to doing this stuff?
Yes. As a matter of fact, I was telling Nick that how in the 70s or even like 80s, a parking lot was a free-for-all. I mean, somebody who was disabled literally had nothing that they could say, I want the front spot. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
And then I would say in the 90s, when they started to introduce these stalls, people used to say, I'm just going to go in and out. And take over that spot. And actually, the ADA had a lot of volunteers, I remember, that would go from site to site and either snitch on the actual mall for not having the correct number, or call the cops on whoever was illegally parked without a sign. But now we've completely respected. We don't even think about it, as far as those spaces, but I would say there was a lot of pushback. The people wanted their premium spots.
Well, why do they get a premium spot? Not realizing. So when you break your leg, have a skiing accident, and now you can't walk anymore, then you'll understand. And I think that's kind of the core of it. It's this level of empathy and understanding for people that are in a situation that's much different than yours, and understanding that that these types of things are in place. It's not about making their lives easier, right? It's not about giving them an architectural handout so it makes it easier for them. No, it's about just providing them with the same level of access you have. They just that access needs to be a little different,
right,
to accommodate their situation.
The mindset had to completely change.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Love it. So
reading a blog
Nick, I just want to do a time check.
Sure. How are we doing on time, guys?
How are we doing on time, guys? Producers. Caitlin.
We've still got some time, so keep going.
Okay. All right, great. Nick, head, float.
No, Mom, is there another topic that you want to talk about? I know you had a lot of slides prepared. Did we bypass anything?
Well, we mentioned smart homes. I think that's something that people are talking about now. And again, that is something that we can retrofit our house even to a minimal level. In essence, we can coordinate our doorbell, a video, and some lights based on just the need for security.
So I recently, I got a window changed in my house, and that new window was wider, so I couldn't put the blinds that I had on the old window wouldn't work anymore. So what I wanted to do was it'd be really cool to get automatic blinds that could go, touch a button and they go down, touch a button, they go up. So I got them from IKEA. They're actually pretty inexpensive and they're very cool. And set them up, but I was able to hook them up through Alexa and HomeKit as well. So I can control them either through my phone, or I created voice commands that I can say, blinds down, blinds up, and they will do that. So I don't have to touch anything. So if, in that case, if I didn't have the use of my hands for whatever reason,
exactly,
I could do that and even have it set off. I got these little smart plugs, so I can have the lights turned off or turned on just by saying, turn the living room off, and the lights go off. So, and those are simple add-ons that you can just do to the existing structure.
Exactly. Accessories, what I'm thinking, the level of accessories that you can bring into your home. And they're not really real barriers per se, maybe for a person who doesn't have use of hands, but for the more of the universal idea of convenience, it's definitely something that we're starting to think about and adding to our homes. New build, I think, is really, really more dedicating into it from the start to have everything in sync with their temperature, the boiler, everything.
Right. So what's interesting about that, when you start talking about smart homes and being when you mentioned the temperature, you have this idea of universal design that is now going beyond the idea of helping people gain access to certain things, but now starts stretching onto other things like efficiency, cost savings, fuel savings, right? Energy savings, things like that.
Yeah.
So do you see more and more, contracts or projects going towards smart home, and then is there a cost difference that's extreme? Is it shrinking? Is it do you see us in 10 years that regular plain old structured homes are not really going to be built anymore, or businesses? There's going to be this idea that there's going to be a smart element to almost everything that we build.
Absolutely. I see that definitely coming up in the future. I think because it covers definitely conserving, our footprint, our carbon footprint is being thought in this type of design. We're thinking about you ask how the affordability, the
Mhm.
more we use it, the easier that budget is going to be integrated into the full new design of it. And I think the younger generation is definitely a lot capable to use this and probably able to ease into it. Maybe I would have a little hesitation on having everything automated, but that next generation is just going to take it in as part of what they're used to,
Yeah. So I like to attribute this stuff to the science fiction of the 50s and 60s. Right? So the idea that
the Jetsons.
The Jetsons, great example, right? So, what was the biggest ailment there was like push button finger, right?
Yeah.
So he just sat there and he pushed buttons all day. Star Trek, doors that opened up when you walked up to them.
Yeah,
right.
That's the supermarket.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people don't realize that, like, there was an idea and there was a reason for that. I like telling this story a lot about, and you probably know this, about the reason why a revolving door was invented, right? And that was so when they had air conditioning, they wanted to keep the cooled air inside the building, and opening up a door, just let it all out. Revolving door is very energy efficient.
Yes.
People don't realize that's the reason why it was, but it becomes this much easier, inside and outside, as long as you don't go into the same part with another person, which I did once, which was wildly uncomfortable. Total mistake. But, so anything else you wanted to kind of touch on?
No, I think pretty much we covered everything. I really, maybe the only thing we didn't cover was cars of the future. How traffic is going to be really better, probably more efficient, than having people cutting everybody on the roads.
So do you see the movie Minority Report?
Actually, I haven't.
So Tom Cruise. So there's a couple scenes in there where he's driving. Nobody drove their cars anymore. They were these kind of pods with wheels that would come down from your apartment 12 floors up and come down and join the road. And there was no driving. It was almost like, almost like a kind of a slot car type of thing going on. But clearly Tesla has autonomous vehicles. That's technology. There's other companies that do that. But you're going to get to a point where somebody who is blind can drive.
Yes.
Right?
That's my point. Yes, exactly.
So, that's well, I have a different view because I really like cars and I really like driving. So I don't know if I want the car to drive for me, although on my trip up to pick up my son from college, that I could have used a self-driving vehicle at one point. Because
I can totally imagine a future where there's two levels of insurance. One if you're a self-driver, one if you're an automated driver.
I'm actually wondering if the automated might be higher.
Oh, okay. All right. I was thinking but yeah.
Well, I hate when people cut me off and I've been waiting on this lane and all of a sudden and I'm exiting a ramp or going into a ramp and they're cutting. Just wait your turn. Yeah. And I think that causes more accidents. I think the automated driving is going to be safer.
I think yes, once you get to a level that there's enough vehicles on the road that are doing that. I'm curious about the point at where there's going to be a tipping point where there's a lot of autonomous vehicles on the road, but then there's people who are manually driving. And the machine can make a decision a lot quicker than a human can, right? And there's that thought experiment. I'm sure this has been used. It was actually the plot of iRobot, the remake, right? Yeah. So like the robot made the decision based on likely survivability, who to save from an accident, right? Yeah. I'm sure there's going to be that level of robot. Well, we totally went sci-fi with this. Caitlin, it's supposed to keep us on track.
No, but it is the inspiration for a lot of the smart home technology, but a lot of everyday technology too, right? Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
Cool.
Right?
So I want to thank you for coming on to our little podcast.
Thank you.
So
My
much fun. A lot of awesome information. I see where Nick gets his good looks. So, and what's going on in the background? There's a lot of cool plants happening around.
Yeah, I have a couple of, and I had to cover the window too. So, yeah, there's plants.
That's good.
And my mom is saving space, so she's got chairs hanging.
You know what? I was going to say that. I go, it looks like you've got chairs up on your ceiling. Those are really chairs.
So
Yes.
because of the COVID, a lot of our entertainment has been within our home. We got a above ground pool in the summer, and in the winter time we got a billiard table, and I had to get rid of my dining room because the kids would come over and we as a family entertained. So if you notice, I had 12 chairs that I had no idea what to do, and this is a very high room.
That's so great. Look at that.
This is when you have an architect in the house.
Yeah, no, that's great. It's like that's like, because it looks like an interesting kind of design going on, and then you realize, oh, those are actually chairs. That's awesome.
So the dining room table went into the laundry room, and the chairs are up there.
That's awesome. That's great. All righty.
Thanks so much, Mom.
Yeah, thank you very much. So
It
this
was my
is
pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to thank everybody for watching our special Accessibility Day, Mother's Day hard refresh episode. We'll be back, I think, with regular scheduled episodes. I don't know. Nick's getting kind of tired of doing some live coding because you never know what's going to happen when live coding goes on. So, but I think we might be moving on past the ARIA stuff and into something else.
Yeah, we'll have
I think
new topics.
So new topics coming up. Got to say this before Caitlin hits me. So if you like what you heard, please subscribe, hit that like icon, and that little bell notification to get notified when we make new episodes. And leave your comments, questions, and feedback down below. We will answer your questions immediately.